Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and for today's video I have something a little bit different. I'm going to be creating a card using the Celebrate stamp set from Sonshine Stamp Co. So you can see here this is a 2x6 stamp set, and it has some really fun sentiments and balloons and banners and things like that, and these are perfectly sized for the margins of your Bible, but I'm going to create a card today. So I have a little piece of scrap cardstock here, and I'm going to use some VersaFine Onyx Black ink to stamp out some of these elements that I pulled from the set. And so then I have this sentiment here that says hooray. And I'm using this ink today because it's a pigment ink, so it stays wet for a little bit longer than like a dye ink. So then I'm going to go ahead and heat emboss this with some clear embossing powder. And what this does is it just kind of intensifies that black and then also gives it a little bit of a shiny finish. So it just adds a little bit more detail to it and makes it just look a little more finished when it's on the card. I'm going to do this for all of the other elements that I'm stamping as well, and that's because I'm going to use watercolor to color them, and the heat embossing creates little wells so that it's easier to watercolor, and you'll kind of see that more as I go into the coloring. But I'm going to go ahead here and heat set that embossing powder. And you can see here that it just really brings out the intensity of that black. So I've gone ahead and done that for all of these images here. They were stamped with that same ink and then heat embossed with clear embossing powder. And I ended up not using all of the balloons that I have stamped out, but I wanted to make sure I had plenty to choose from when I went to assemble the card. So I'm going to use some distress inks to watercolor today. I'm using Cracked Pistachio and Abandoned Coral. And I went ahead and just smushed them onto my craft sheet. And then I'm just taking this water brush, this one here is from Adorn It, and I'm just going to fill in these balloons and banners using the ink. So the more water you use with this ink, the paler the shade of color is, and the less water, the more intense the color is. So I'm just going through and kind of creating just a little bit of simple shading on the balloons, but I'm not getting too detailed because they're pretty small little images. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill all of these in. Now, because I've heat embossed the stamping, the watercolors don't run together because they're not touching, so you can just paint right next to each other where things are still wet. I'm going to also take this gold Wink of Luna shimmer pen just to add a little bit of gold to this banner here. And there's going to be some other gold elements on the card, so I wanted to kind of tie that in. And that's it for the coloring. Now I'm going to go ahead, there aren't dies that go with these stamps, so I'm just going to go ahead and fussy cut everything out, leaving a little bit of a white border, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut around all of these elements so that I can add them to the card. This takes a little bit of time, but you could sit down and do a whole bunch of these all at once, and then you'd have them set aside to do cards whenever you want. Here I have a piece of mint colored cardstock, and it's cut to 2¼ inches by 5½ inches. And I'm going to do some tone-on-tone stamping. So I have this Cracked Pistachio ink, and I've taken one of the smaller confetti stamps from the stamp set, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp these on this panel. And this ink is really close to the color that the cardstock is, so you're getting this really just muted tone-on-tone look with the confetti. So I'll go ahead and just stamp that on the background, and then we'll go back in and we'll add the other, they're like little ribbon piece confettis. We'll go ahead and add that in, but we're going to do some heat embossing with that. I'll go ahead and just, these inks are really easy to clean. You can just wipe them off because they are water-based. You just wipe it off and it's good to go. I want to make sure that I heat set this ink really good. The distress inks take a long time to dry, and since I'm going to be doing some heat embossing next, I don't want the embossing powder to stick to the stamping that I've already done. So I went ahead and heat set that really good. And now I don't have like an embossing buddy or a embossing bag or anything like that, or powder tool, so I'm just putting a little bit of baby powder and using a paintbrush just to brush it over the cardstock, and that just makes sure that the embossing powder doesn't stick to any areas that I don't want it to on this piece of cardstock. So now I've taken some of those little ribbon confettis, and I'm using some Versamark ink to stamp these. This is a clear sticky ink. And then we'll go ahead and we're going to use some Zing Gold Glitter Embossing Powder to emboss these. So here's where we're going to bring in a little bit more gold to this card. And this one I found at Hobby Lobby in the clearance section, and I really like it. It's just got just a little bit of sparkle to it, and it's a really pretty, kind of an antiqued gold color. So I'm going to go ahead and just apply that, and you can see here it doesn't stick to anything but that Versamark ink that I stamped with. And I just make sure that I clean up my embossing powder before I heat set. I don't want to accidentally heat up the embossing powder that I have extra on that paper there. I'm going to go ahead and take my heat tool again, and I make sure that I let it warm up a little bit before I take it to the paper. That way that cardstock doesn't get warped from the heat. And you can see here as it melts, it turns into this really pretty shiny gold, and it has little flecks of gold glitter in it. So we'll just go ahead and heat set all of that, and then we can start assembling pieces here. So I have a panel there, and it's cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to go ahead and just use adhesive runner to adhere this panel to that white cardstock panel here. I'm just making sure that I have plenty of adhesive on there. There's a little bit of warping from the heat embossing, and I'm going to go ahead and just stick that to the left-hand side of this card and press that down real good. And then I have some confetti that I found at Target, so I'm going to go ahead and apply just a strip of this tape to the edge of that panel. And this is how the confetti is going to stick to the card. So I'm just leaving that sticky exposed. And then I found this confetti in the dollar spot of Target. So I'm just going to put a bunch of it down, and then I'm just going to press that sticky tape into there. And you can see here all the little confetti pieces stick to the exposed tape. And I'm just shaking off any of the excess and just kind of touching it to make sure there's no sticky exposed. If there is, I can go ahead and just place some confetti into those areas. That way the sticky isn't kind of sticking to other things you don't want it to stick to. And that's just a fun way to add some interest to the card without it being horribly messy. I'm making sure to get all of the excess off so it's completely stuck. So my camera didn't record how I assembled this. I'm going to show you here. I just used some foam adhesive to adhere all those little pieces that we had cut out to the other edge, and then I adhered that whole panel to a top folding card cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And that is it for the video today. So be sure to check the description bar down below for links to the products used today. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.